On today's Locked On Thunder podcast, who is going to break out for the Oklahoma City Thunder and the in-season tournament gets announced?
You are Locked On Thunder, your daily Oklahoma City Thunder podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Let's get it going on the Locked On Thunder podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day. I am your host, media member, and SI Thunder beat writer Rylan Stiles. Follow me on Twitter at Rylan_Stiles. Follow the show on Twitter at LO ThunderPod. On today's show, we're joined by Randall Sweet at Randall Sweet 5 on Twitter and SI Thunder staff writer to discuss the Oklahoma City Thunder, who's going to break out this year for the Thunder, and the NBA Cup, formerly known as the NBA in-season tournament. They have announced their schedule officially. Slowly, there's leaks coming out about the NBA schedule. It'll be announced fully on Thursday. We'll have that covered for you, of course, on Friday morning for your drive to work. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Go check it out today because you can make every moment more at FanDuel.com with daily bonuses or boosts. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long at FanDuel.com. Go there right now to get started. Randall, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I appreciate you having me on. It's an honor to be here. Yeah, it's a good day. How about you, Rylan?
It's going good. Trying to make it through the slog of the NBA calendar. The basketball rarely sleeps, but it does get a couple hours here in August and September. And then we'll be right back in full force. So that'll be very exciting. But Randall, you're writing over at SI Thunder with me. You have a great article out today about what to expect from Nikola Topic. I'm a player that I'm very fascinated by as well. We've both written about him recently. But how are you envisioning this Thunder season going?
I think that obviously after a great season last year with the additions they made over the offseason, it's pretty reasonable to expect similar results. I think that maybe the beginning of the season, the team could lose a few more games than expected just because you're welcoming in two new players who, are probably going to play heavy minutes. And so, that could maybe trip the team up in a few games that you might not expect. But I think that, by the end of the season, the team, when they get that chemistry humming, that they'll really be firing on all cylinders. Obviously, we've seen how they can attack you offensively. The defense should be even better than it was last year with the additions of Caruso and Hartenstein. Some of the young guys getting older. So I think that by the end of the year, this team is going to be just right where most of the NBA world expects it to be. And I think that they'll be competing in the Western Conference just like they were last year, but now with some playoff seasoning, some playoff experience into their belts.
It's going to be interesting to see kind of how they adjust both with the new additions, but also with the expectations that'll be placed on them now. The last couple of seasons, a key point we've been discussing on the show recently is that the last couple of seasons, the expectations were very easy to surpass. It was very easy to get a passing grade. Now, the Thunder the last two seasons went above and beyond that passing grade. For example, in the 40 and 42 season, that was an A+ year. You didn't expect that massive climb, especially when Chet Holmgren went out. But to make the play-in tournament was just spectacular. And then last year, you're expecting, top 6 would be a good year, and they rattled off 57 wins. But this year, there is no true way to outkick expectations because even winning a Larry O'Brien trophy would be, of course, a fantastic season. But you would be throwing the parade for the trophy and everything else, but it would be sort of expected of like that's what you were built to do and designed to do for this team. Obviously, winning the trophy is an easy way to pass expectations for OKC. But there are certainly very few other ways where you end this year very happily. I think losing in the finals would still be a good year for how young this team is. I would say losing in the Western Conference Finals would be disappointing on the surface of anytime you get that close, it's disappointing, but would still be a positive step. But past that, Randall, is there any other way for this team to walk away from the May and June months with a passing grade?
No, I mean, I agree with you completely, Riley. And I think that, after what you saw this year, with going out and spending $87 million on Isaiah Hartenstein, the biggest free agent signing in history, in Thunder history, getting rid of Josh Giddey, who many people thought was the issue on the team, and bringing in a player who, can fill the role. If you don't make an improvement from, the Western Conference semifinals where you were last year, then it kind of feels like that, it's not what I think a lot of fans would expect. And so I think that, you're going to, if you're the Thunder, you're going to have to make it a step further than you did last season. If you want to be seen as, like you said, a passing grade. I think that is an interesting aspect of this season too, is seeing how, the team handles that. Because of course, like you said, even last year when they're rattling off 57 wins in the regular season, no one expected that. Even, I mean, maybe until the middle of the end of the season, when we actually saw this wasn't just like a fluke. This was actually, happening. The team was really as good as they had looked, throughout early in the season.
So, today you wrote about Topic, and we'll get to him later on. But you also wrote recently something that you touched on earlier, about how this Thunder team could struggle out of the gate with all the new additions, and things might not come together as seamlessly as possible. Obviously, you still believe this team presumably is at the very top of the West, but that is like an underrated storyline that I think could see a early season overreaction to. If we're trying to guess what will set Twitter on fire, it'll be every loss this year. Like, this is going to be a year more so than ever before, because even last year had a tinge of this, where every loss, it feels like you're watching a football season unfold, because that's the culture in Oklahoma is the Sooners and is the Pokes and is watching football, and every loss in football feels like the world is over, whereas in basketball, it comes with the territory of an 82-game season. But nonetheless, out of the gate, they might not rattle off 10 straight wins. They could, but they might not rattle off, a huge success. What are you most looking for when it comes to this team gelling? Is there anything in specific that makes you think, hey, there might be a little bit of a hiccup out of the gate?
I think the rotations are going to be really interesting to look at. I mean, anyone who's followed the Thunder knows that Mark Daigneault is, I don't even know the best word to describe the way he does rotations. He's very unique, I guess, maybe is the way I would put it. He's going to play who he wants to play. He's not really going to be influenced by, egos or what people think, people on the outside think. He's gonna do whatever he thinks is best for the team, and it might not even be what he thinks is best for the team in that specific game, as we've seen and throughout his time as the head coach. Now, that this year is probably different because, like you said, there's a lot more pressure, it feels like, to win every game. And so, I think that Mark and his rotations this year are going to be a really interesting way to see how the team gels. Where does Caruso, where does Hartenstein slide into those two, the starting unit, the bench unit? How are those two altered, and the minutes of each of those players, the distribution of those minutes altered? Are the players fitting into their new roles well? And that's what I think. That's where I think really could take a few games to settle in, because if these guys are playing different roles on the second unit or the first unit than they're used to, that's where I feel like the team could struggle. So that's what I think early in the season will be, how can they figure some of those kinks out, if they have any. Of course, like you mentioned, they could rattle off 10 straight wins. This might not even be a conversation,
but it's worth having right now. And I think that the rotation it is one of the most interesting storylines, because whenever you look at this team on paper right now, you can rattle off 10 names easily that you want to see play and that you want to see get some minutes. And we know that Mark is the ultimate tinkerer with lineups and with roster and exploring different things. And he's going to do some of that throughout the season, just in totality, but also especially fresh out of the gate. And, I think that there is going to be an interesting blend of, like, we know that the Thunder are not going to be like what New York does and just ignore the bottom half of their roster, even on game 15. So there's going to be an element of, you want to see what progress that Ousmane Dieng's made. But if you're playing Ousmane Dieng, you're not playing, frankly, a better player for X amount of minutes in that game. And you want to see what Dylan Jones looks like, because this is a guy who the Thunder have coveted for back-to-back drafts. They traded 5 second-round picks for him. None of us can figure out what exactly his position will look like in the NBA. Had a strong summer league. They clearly hold him in high regard. He's a pro-ready prospect in terms of age and in terms of experiences, but this is the most difficult rotation to crack in the NBA. So just because they're the most talented at the top doesn't mean it's going to be that they will only use those top 10 players. We've seen that that's just not true. And when you're mixing and matching rotations like this Rubik's Cube that Mark uses, you're going to potentially stumble a little bit. I think what's been so fascinating with the Thunder is they won 57 games last year doing just that. And like the thing I think that gets underrated about Mark a little bit, especially nationally when you're not watching every game, you're not watching things game to game, it's the ability to explore his roster, not only with minute totals, but also with letting players be adventurous in those minutes and try new things. But having that not be detrimental to the team. And that's a very delicate balance. It's a very thin line to walk, but he walks it very well, and he'll walk it again well this year. But, you've just got to see how you play off of each other, how to find your role. One thing for Isaiah Hartenstein is, at his intro presser, him and Sam Presti both talked a lot about how he's not a finished product, how he's still going to develop. And Hartenstein talked a lot about shooting threes. It feels like, just based on that press conference, that they will explore his game a bit more than they did in New York, which you can put two and two together and assume that that means shooting threes. What's the balance of trying him as a three-point shooter versus using what we know works with Hartenstein? And that's his mid-range, his floater, his screens, pick and roll stuff, and playmaking out of the high post, and also just kind of being a post hub as a playmaker for the offense. So it'll be fascinating to see how they all come together. And the biggest question that everybody talks about is the starting five. I think that it'll be Caruso in place of Giddey, and you roll with that starting five. Where are you at with the starting five convo, Randall?
Yeah, I think I agree with you completely. I think that, we've seen the Thunder really like to play with that group on the court. Of course, obviously they haven't done it yet with Alex Caruso, but I think that he's the most similar to that Josh Giddey, I guess the role that Josh Giddey played whenever he was with that group, where he was, kind of staying on the perimeter, acting as a catch and shoot guy, playing defense. And obviously Caruso can be more of a lead defender. I mean, you got him and Lou Dort out there at the same time, but Caruso can be more of a lead defender than Josh Giddey was. He's been proven that he's a better three-point shooter than Josh Giddey is. So I think that he slides into that role a lot easier than Hartenstein does, because then you've got to figure out, all right, well, how does he play with Chet, and the rest of the starting unit, versus where you can kind of stagger the two, and then, maybe later in the game, give them minutes together if you decide to do that. Of course, last year we didn't really see a lot of minutes between Jay Will and Chet. And so it'll be interesting to see if maybe they're willing to do that more with Hartenstein and Chet this year. And like you said, during the season, that's when Mark is more willing to experiment with some of those rosters, play some of that stuff. So maybe, during the regular season, we see more of that to kind of see how it looks. I think that'll be an interesting story to follow throughout the season. But I'm with you. I think that Caruso slides much more seamlessly into the starting lineup than Hartenstein would, just because of his position and the way he plays.
It'll be great to see how this season unfolds. Cannot wait for that. Coming up, who's going to be a breakout player for the Thunder, and the in-season tournament schedule gets revealed. But first, I want to say right now about our good friends over at FanDuel. Randall, we love sports, and we never want them to stop. But with the NBA postseason over with, football from last year in the rear view, but coming up in the windshield now, with it just days away, we're still in that in-between period where sports are not quite sportsing like we want them to. But FanDuel is letting you get a daily bonus or boost for all customers. That's what FanDuel's hooking you up with all day, every day, all summer long for everyone. You can head over to FanDuel.com and make the most of your summer. But if you're listening to this on August 14th in the year of our Lord 2024, you might be considering that you only really feel comfortable betting on the NBA, and that's okay, because you can still do that. And how can you still do that? With future bets, including the NBA Cup, which we're going to talk about coming up, as the Thunder hold the second best odds to win the NBA Cup, but also the NBA regular season as the win totals fly out, and the Thunder have an over-under set at 56.5 wins. Joe Mazzato's taking the over. What will you do? Go there at FanDuel.com right now and check it out today. We're back on the Lockdown Thunder podcast, on the Lockdown Podcast Network, your teams every day, joined by Randall Sweet at Randall Sweet 5 on Twitter, SI Thunder, SI Sooners, SI everything with Randall Sweet. Also has Pokes coverage as well, just everything that you could want and care about in Oklahoma. Randall Sweet has you covered, also follows Oklahoma high school football for recruiting truly everywhere. Randall, today, as you were covering OU's practice, the NBA announced the in-season tournament schedule. And that schedule is a loaded one for the Thunder. So to refresh your memory, this is the NBA Cup, the artist formerly known as the in-season tournament. We spent a whole year calling it one thing. Let's change it now in year two. It starts with group play, and group play will go for the Thunder from the 15th of November to the 3rd of December. And if you can survive group play, you make the playoffs, and you have a game at a NBA arena, so to say, in your first round. But if you make it past that in the Final Four, you play in Vegas for the Final Four games. Really, the only thing that changes, and I still saw some people, one person, in my mentions in particular, of like they hate the in-season tournament and the NBA Cup's a bad idea. I really don't get that sentiment, because if you're just a fan and you don't care about the NBA Cup, you don't have to care. These games count as regular season games. They adjacently also count as NBA Cup games. The only thing that changes for you is the courts are different, and typically the jerseys are different as well. Other than that, nothing changes unless your team plays in the Cup championship. It's still 82 games. It still counts in the standings that you're used to. It's still November basketball. Everything about it is the exact same, except for the court and the jerseys. And if the court and jerseys bother you that much, I think you've already skipped out on the NBA with how much that they change their jerseys and courts. So I just don't buy into the people who dislike the NBA Cup. There's nothing to really hate on. As much as we love to hate in the year of our Lord 2024, there's nothing to hate on the NBA Cup. The Thunder are in Group B in the West. They play the Phoenix Suns, San Antonio Spurs, Los Angeles Lakers, and Utah Jazz. They will play them in that order. November 15th against the Suns in the Paycom Center. Kevin Durant, presumably for the first time this season, will be in the Paycom Center at 7 p.m. On Tuesday, November 19th, the Thunder will go to San Antonio to play Wembanyama and the Spurs. Another matchup between Wemby and Chet, which is on primetime television, national television, 8:30 p.m. Central on TNT. On Friday, November 29th, back-to-back national TV games for the Thunder. They'll go to LA, play the purple and gold at 7 p.m. on ESPN. And on December 3rd against the Utah Jazz, that one will be on local television at 7 p.m. on December 3rd. That's your group. Randall, how do you feel about the Thunder's chances in Group B?
I mean, I think you have to feel pretty good about the Thunder's chances. Of course, there's going to be some tough matchups. I mean, obviously we've seen, last regular season, the Thunder, I think, had some tough matchups against the Lakers in the regular season. The Suns, of course, the Thunder looked pretty good against them last year. The Spurs the same way. So it'll be interesting to see how all those teams look with some of their additions. Obviously, the Spurs game is going to be really intriguing. I think there's fun storylines in every one of these games. But I think that, the Thunder have a good chance, now with Isaiah Hartenstein, some extra size, with Alex Caruso, another defensive presence out there on the wing, to really match up well against the Suns, against the Spurs, and against the Lakers. So I think that they have a good chance in Group B. Of course, with Wembanyama, with LeBron and Anthony Davis, with Kevin Durant and Devin Booker, nothing is for certain. So there will be a few tough games in there, I'm sure. And last year, even as good as the Thunder were, they didn't make it out of their group. They lost a game to the Warriors at home. I know that they lost a few other of their in-season tournament games too. So nothing's for certain. But I do think that, with the size that Hartenstein offers, the defensive presence that Caruso offers there on the wing to guard guys like Durant and Booker, that you've got a better chance than you would have last season.
Yeah, your dog does not like the fact that the Thunder did not make the knockout round of the NBA Cup, and I can't really blame him. That controversial ending against the Warriors on that goaltend, not goaltend, really got his goat. But if you had to pick one of the games as your must-watch favorite game of the slate, you've got the Suns in the Paycom Center, Spurs on the road, Lakers on the road, Jazz at the Paycom Center. I think that everyone jumps to the Spurs, and rightfully so. The NBA is marketing Wemby, Chet, as this rivalry playing on national television again. And those two guys, they've said the right things. They have not put out press clippings about one another. But talk is cheap a little bit because when they're on the court against each other, it is very clear that they understand the narratives. They understand that they're going to be pit against each other the rest of their careers. They really, even more so than a typical regular season game, want to dominate and want to get the better of one another. They were flexing on each other in the preseason, Randall. So, I get why the NBA is hyping up and wanting to push this rivalry, but I'm actually more interested in the Lakers game. And that sounds maybe a bit surprising, but the Lakers were, as what they would deem a disastrous season last year, for as bad as they thought last year was, consistently throughout last year, they played the Thunder the toughest. Flat out. A 57-win team was played the toughest by the Los Angeles Lakers. And a lot of that was from their ability to pack the paint and spray out to the catch-and-shoot guys from the Thunder and use their size and length to disrupt mid-range shooters and funnel drivers into Anthony Davis. It was a very sound strategy versus Oklahoma City, one that they never really fully combated, and that's why many people were not scared, so to say, but we're saying that was the toughest matchup the Thunder could have drawn in the first round. Ultimately, they get the Pelicans and sweep them in the first round, but nonetheless, I just want to see that matchup. I presume that this will be the first time that they go head-to-head in the NBA Cup, although it is November 29th, so you still have a lot of time there to make that not so. But with the assumption that this is the first Lakers game, I just want to see what it looks like. I mean, of course, you get to watch AD and LeBron too, but I just want to see what it looks like for a team that kind of had the answers for OKC last year. Now the Thunder have dramatically changed their roster. What does it look like on the court? But what's the game for you? Because there is a lot to pick from. KD's return to OKC is always fun. Wemby, Chet, spunky Jazz, maybe. What's your favorite game?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head with the Lakers game. It will be really interesting to see how the Thunder handle, like you said, a team that handled them last year in the regular season. Obviously, that game being on national TV is fun as well. You go back 2 years with the Thunder beating LeBron when he broke the scoring record. So there's a fun mini history between the recent additions of these teams here. The Jazz games, not really much too many storylines outside of the Thunder were maybe a contender for Lauri Markkanen for a little bit, maybe not, and now he's long-term with the Jazz. But the game that I'm really excited about, I'm really excited, like you mentioned, to see that Spurs game. Of course, another nationally televised game on the road. We'll get to see how the Thunder play in San Antonio, and I think that the Wemby versus Chet rivalry is going to be after what Wembanyama did in the gold medal game on the international stage, I should say. He's going to be an even more heightened brand than already before. That rivalry between him and Chet's going to be more entertaining, especially with some of the video clips that you've been posting and writing about of Chet in the offseason, how he's expanded his game. Obviously, we know that Wembanyama's got a very versatile game as well. I think that the two of them, obviously that rivalry is going to be really intriguing to see how it takes a step forward this year, especially because even when they both played each other well last year, we saw Wembanyama a few times get the better of Chet Holmgren. And, I think we've heard from various, NBA veterans, Chet Holmgren is an extremely competitive guy. He lost out on Rookie of the Year to Victor Wembanyama. How does he respond? How does he come back? Is he playing within himself like he did last season, or is he more out for blood, ready to go hunt his shot when he gets into one of those situations? So that I'm really excited to see that. And of course, former Thunder point guard Chris Paul now, with the Spurs. It'll be interesting to see how that team grows with him. And I know they made a few other additions as well. Are they more formidable, maybe to sneak into the bottom of the play-in? And I think that it'll be a fun game between them and the Thunder when they play. Is that late November, right?
Yeah. So the game against the Spurs will be November 19th. So mid-November, you could call it, in San Antonio. So it'll be fun to see those two teams face off. But the in-season tournament, now known as the NBA Cup, it'll be a lot of fun to follow and see if the Thunder can go to Vegas. If they do, perhaps we get Locked On Thunder in Vegas. That would be a heck of a time. I would for sure see an Elvis impersonator. Might do a podcast live from an Elvis impersonator on Locked On Thunder. But coming up, who is the breakout candidate for the Thunder? Who will take the biggest stride with Randall coming up? We're back on the Lockdown Thunder podcast, on the Lockdown Podcast Network, your teams every day. Thank you so much for making us your first listen every single morning, every single day. We're here for you, talking Thunder basketball. Randall, we've seen that the Thunder are kind of right here on the precipice of a season in which everybody's picking them to win the West. Everybody thinks it's them in Boston, kind of on their own tier. We talked about that with Derek Parker on Wednesday's show. This will come out on Thursday ahead of the schedule release. So with that being said, it's easy to really get locked in on like Shea, J-Dub, Chet, etc. Let's first tackle, who do you think could be in line for a breakout in Oklahoma City this year?
Well, I think that, you touched on a few young guys earlier, like Dylan Jones, like Ousmane Dieng, who are trying to break into the rotation. While it would be fun to see those guys, I don't anticipate them having breakout years. Again, it's fun to, theoreticize about what they could be. But the guy I would really point to, and it feels like kind of a cop-out answer. It feels kind of obvious. But then again, this roster is just so deep. It feels like anyone you point to would be obvious. I think Cason Wallace is really the guy you look to. He had a solid rookie season last year, with another offseason under Chip England in the system. Maybe he's more confident now than he was a year ago as a rookie. He's another year older. Again, he only played 1 year in college. So this isn't a guy like Jalen Williams who came in as an older player. And now, with Josh Giddey out of the lineup, with Nikola Topic still a year away, maybe he's able to handle the ball more, do some of those things that he did in college. And I think that he showed a lot of flashes of, a really solid role player last year. I think it'll be really interesting to see in year 2, can he take that step forward? That's who I would really be looking at. Again, it feels like a lot of the other candidates on this team have already taken that leap. So it feels like he's the guy who's got the most potential left to capitalize on, I guess I would say.
I would agree with Cason Wallace because I think that there is like an avenue for him to look different. And that's typically what people classify as like a breakout year. Do you look different than you looked a year ago? I think that he'll still have his bread and butter of what he did a year ago of catch and shoot, 3-and-D, or just hounding you defensively, a ball hawking safety almost out there at times with Cason Wallace. But they've hinted at needing to fill some playmaking from losing Josh Giddey. They've hinted at Chet doing it. They've hinted at Cason Wallace doing it. We know Cason has that point guard background. Mark openly said last year that they still believe in that ability. It was just the simple fact of, in a typical year that they thought they might have had, like whenever you go back to this time last year, I think that the goal this time last year was get Cason with the NBA team, but also find those doubleheader days, find those stints where you can send him to the blue and let him be a point guard and let him play in a role that he couldn't play for the Thunder. But he made himself so indispensable that you could never send him down there. He didn't play a single second for the G League team, and they went on to win the G League finals. But now you've had a summer to where you can really tap into that. You can really try to develop your on-ball prowess, and making him an on-ball player plus an off-ball player, that can skyrocket his value along with what we expect him to do defensively, what he already showed as a rookie he can do defensively. That will take a step forward as well. So I love that pick. I would also look at a guy like Aaron Wiggins, and it sounds maybe silly because if you're listening to this podcast in the middle of August, you know all about Aaron Wiggins. Like, you are an absolute basketball sicko. You're a Thunder sicko. We appreciate that wholeheartedly at both Lockdown Thunder and SI Thunder. But with Wiggins, you're seeing him thrown into Bleacher Report's most underrated player and like all these different things. So like the national buzz is starting to get there. And if there's anything in this business that's consistent, is people want to prove that they're right. Even though we're all going to be wrong many a times, people love to prove that they're right. And so with all the national pundits picking him to be like this breakout underrated player, whatever, they'll be tracking him a little bit more because you want to kind of do your victory laps. Also, an area that I wonder if it changes at all, the Thunder paid him this summer. And like there were stretches of last year, especially early on, where you walked away from every game. And mind you, most games ended with the Thunder win because they won 57 games last year. Most games ended with the Thunder playing well, even in losses. But you still walked away from every win and every game even saying, man, they should have played Wiggins more. Like they should have played Wiggins more. When you pay a guy, does that notion go away in the sense of you do play him more and you do get him out there more? And I think that we've seen every step of the way, when you play Wiggins, it's never a bad idea. He's never the one to make the mistake. He's never the one to cost you a possession or even a game. And so with more consistent minutes, which again, will be hard to come by in this loaded team, but if he does get that, you'll see an uptick in production. You'll also see the national media, who's even in August hyping him up, come around to the idea and the notion we've already known here in Oklahoma City. He's already a fan favorite, like with a cult following with the Wiggins Safe basketball stuff. So putting all that together, I think that he could be a candidate to have a quote unquote breakout year, even though the real Thunder sickos would already have expected it.
Yeah, I think that's a really good pick. That was another guy that kind of came across my mind, and it's you mentioned a lot of the national attention he's getting. Isn't it crazy what a playoff run will do for a guy like Aaron Wiggins, right? Because like you said, he's had a cult following in Oklahoma City for what he's been showing for the Thunder for the past few years. I think a lot of people who watch the Thunder regularly have seen that he is a very valuable role player, but now when he's doing it on the national stage, helping them sweep the Pelicans, or that big outing I think he had in Game 1 against the Mavericks. When you're putting that on the national stage, it's a lot more. There's a lot more eyes on you, and so a lot more people are seeing, oh, hey, this guy is a valuable role player. He can do a lot of things. He's making big plays for the team, and I think also what helps him is he's a really fun player to watch. He does all the right stuff. He cuts, he finishes plays, and so I think that people like to watch that. And then another guy who the Thunder also paid this summer, Isaiah Joe. Maybe there's a few more eyes now on him. Can he maybe get his way into the 3-point contest this year? That would be fun to see him at All-Star Weekend. So that's another guy who maybe now that he's got a few more dollars in his pocket could be more in the national spotlight. Maybe not a breakout statistically, or Thunder fans again know what he can do, but maybe more on the national side, maybe more national recognition for him.
Yeah, I did see today that he did not make the cut for the top, I believe it was 12 3-point shooters in NBA 2K. Very devastating for him, but nonetheless, Klay Thompson's still up there, and they put Kevin Durant on there and everything else. But that aside, biggest improvement this year, I think, actually comes from the top of the roster. I think that Chet Holmgren is the biggest improvement. Going in from year 1 to year 2, typically you see a massive leap from year 2 to 3. But for Chet, I think that you can simply unlock more from Chet by two things that are very easy to produce, or easier to produce than most. First and foremost, Shea and J-Dub have to get better at finding him earlier in the pick and roll. You go back and watch Chet in the pick and roll. Oftentimes, they waited too long to give him the basketball, or didn't give him the ball at all, kind of looked him off and went for a tough mid-range shot. Whereas, you can leverage that differently. Chet is such a talented passer that if you give him the ball early in the pick and roll and the defenses rotate over to him and kind of negate his scoring ability, then he can get the ball back to you if you're J-Dub or Shea, and then you can go and take that tough mid-range shot and knock it down. And so you can kind of work smarter, not harder there, and spoon feed him some buckets at times. And so that just comes with the territory of, here's two guys who are still growing as playmakers. I mean, it's not that far removed. While we look at Shea now and say he's a back-to-back top 5 MVP guy, and that's like the big tagline to use, we're not that far removed from is he a point guard debates. Like that was not so distant in the rearview mirror. So he's still learning that spot. J-Dub especially still learning that spot at the NBA level. So I think that will take a natural uptick. I think you saw Shea look better as a playmaker in Olympic play. I think that will take a natural uptick, which will help him. And then the other thing is fully on Chet. I think that he'll understand now, like in year 2, that, hey, I'm one of the guys, like I'm a top 3 guy on this team, bar none. Like there's no debating that. It's on me offensively at times to go and score buckets. I have more leeway than other guys on the roster. Let's just call it what it is. Like a good shot for Chet, and even an average shot for Chet, is better and even, dare I say, more efficient than a great shot for somebody else at times. Like you want your guys taking shots. So some of the times where he was instantly looking to get off the ball and pass and keep the ball moving. Some of the times where he was like sizing up a smaller defender, but wanted to try to find a better shot. Just take that shot over the smaller defender. Shoot over guys. You use your leverage in that case of your height and of your high release to get easy buckets in the post. And so Chet had a phenomenal rookie season, and there is very little to criticize of Chet's rookie year. Like that was incredible. It wins Rookie of the Year nearly any other year than the year you're going up against Wemby. But with those two minor tweaks that like is really splitting hairs, he takes another step forward. Before we even mention adding on muscle, adding on just the development of playing a year in the NBA and growing from those experiences, before we talk about any of that and the natural progression in life as a player, as you head towards your prime, Those two things makes his production uptick, and those two things make him look like an overall, different player. And so I think that because of that, it'll be a loud improvement. It'll be an improvement that's easy to quantify. And so we'll look at him and say he was the most improved.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that like you said, when you look at the top of the roster, I think that the most improvement there will come from Chet. And I think that all the reasons you mentioned, like I said earlier, you've been posting videos and writing about it to kind of put a visual to what you just described. Some of the increased maybe role that he'll have this season. I also think that seeing how his body, now that he's played a full, like you mentioned, played a full season in the NBA, that 82 games plus the playoffs. This year is at the end of the season in the playoffs. Is he less tired? Is he able to make more of an not more of an impact? Because obviously he was huge for the Thunder down the stretch. But is he more ready now later in the season? Is he not going to be as fatigued? Because maybe I think in the playoffs and especially late in the regular season, you could see, especially from beyond the arc, where he was kind of getting tired, especially in his lower half, and that's to be expected. That's natural for someone who's played, again, 82 games for the first time in their career, plus the playoffs after coming off of, a foot injury. And he mentioned it on social media at the end of the regular season, how tired he was from, how taxing that is. And so, this year, is his body, more prepared for that at the end of the regular season? Once they get into the playoffs, is he going to be able to, keep that consistency from beyond the arc that he had, at the beginning of the season? And I think he will be more prepared for that. Again, from all accounts, he's a guy who works really, really hard. I think that, again, the videos we've seen this offseason just back that up. I don't think that he's going to be taking any time off. And I think that, like you said, he's a guy who's going to improve a lot heading into his now, I guess, technically sophomore campaign.
Yeah, and I think that with Chet too, there's an element of was last year's mission of playing 82 games. Like any player wants to play every single night, of course. But now that you've done it, now that you've played 82 games, and obviously, there could have been a chip on his shoulder from all the talk of having missed his rookie year, because even before he missed his rookie year, there was questions about his durability. Wrongfully so. His rookie year's injury was the first time in his life that he gotten hurt. So that was always just silly to judge his durability. But now you've played 82 games, and he'll quick to remind you that he played all of the postseason and he played all of the preseason as well. Now that you've done it and you've accomplished that goal, do you now see why some nights guys take off, guys rest a little bit? Now, what's interesting is that's not the culture in OKC though. Shea doesn't take nights off unless he's genuinely hurt. J-Dub does not take nights off unless he's genuinely hurt. So the reason that Shea and J-Dub were not on that list were because that J-Dub stepped on the camera guy and twisted his ankle, and Shea hurt his hamstring, and then and bumped knees and everything. That was the reason they didn't play, or else they would have also been on that list. So how do the Thunder look at him now that he's played 82? Do they want to play 82 again, or do they want to kind of just manage him? Because he mentioned on the Woj pod during the season that the Thunder had approached him about back-to-backs and about managing the load of the season, and he wanted to play desperately, and they let him play, and he won that discussion, so to say. What does it look like in year two? Now that you've proven to the world, okay, I can play 82 games, folks. It's not something that I'm incapable of. So I am interested to see how Chet does in that aspect. But Randall, this was a lot of fun. Let them know about you, man. This was a great podcast. Hope to have you back soon. They can find you on Twitter at Randall Sweet 5. What are you cooking up? Where are you at? What are you doing?
Yeah, so with the college football season here, we're about to launch into full-on Sooners coverage. Like you mentioned at the beginning of this pod, we've been out at practice recently. We've been talking to Brent Venables, some players. So Sooners on SI. If you're an OU fan, definitely head over there. Check out all the stuff we've got cooking up over there. Some big-time recruiting stories coming up here in the next few weeks. I'll be on the road to cover some recruiting stuff when the high school season starts. So definitely any Sooners information that you're looking for over there. Same thing with Oklahoma State. Head over to Oklahoma State on SI with the Cowboys season coming up. It'll be very interesting. They finally got a chance to a real possibility to make the college football playoff this year. So it's an exciting time. And also, of course, Thunder on SI. We've got some great stuff coming. NBA season is, like you said, not too far in front of us. So soon there'll be plenty of in-season stuff to be cooking up over there too.
It'll be great to see. Media Day not far away, but it feels distant right now. Randall, thanks again for joining us. Go check out Thunder on SI, where you can find both of our writings over there. Again, follow him on Twitter at RandallSweet5. Follow me on Twitter at Ryland_Styles. And until tomorrow, be good and be good to one another.